Hi, I'm John Spencer. I'm the world's leading expert in urban warfare and the author of the book Connected Soldiers and another book called Understanding Urban Warfare. Today, we're going to talk to you about business leadership lessons from urban warfare, and it's not about being the old school general. We're going to talk to you about why winning and losing on the battlefield and in business is about meaning. We're also going to talk about why leaders like President Zelensky tap into the emotional source code of their nations, not once, but consistently.
Welcome back to part two of our delicious conversation with our expert, John Spencer. He is considered by many the world's leading expert on urban warfare. He's also a radical thought leader, experienced war vet, team builder, and creative mind. He's a professor. He's been the head of different organizations around urban warfare, whether that's with Madison Policy Forum or whether that's with the Modern War Institute at West Point, all over the place. And he's also written two books in the last year, The Connected Soldiers, which is life, leadership, and social connections in modern war, and Understanding Urban Warfare, a book that was written for the Ukraine civilians and went viral and has literally saved many, many thousands of lives of civilians in helping them to defeat what was previously seen as the second largest military force in the world. In part one, we talked about what's really going on over there in the Ukraine. We talked about why it's so important for the U.S. to be involved, and not just U.S., but NATO. And, we talked about the geopolitical stance of it, but we also talked about this understanding of if people didn't, or people meaning NATO didn't get involved, if these countries weren't involved, we're really ignoring the bully, and it would allow Putin and that regime to rewrite the rules of war and to go after every country that was previously seen as part of the USSR. And again, we should be clear here. And if you haven't read the Putin report I wrote, you can find that on dovbaron.com, where I show you what the emotional source code of this individual is and what his identity is and what drives him. And in there I talk about that he wrote a thing called Russia World, and he said, a world without Russia is a world not worth having, that tells you the extremes he's willing to go to. That also then talks to the other side, which is people saying, well, we should find a peaceful way because the guy's a nutter and he'll blow us all apart. But as John has shared with us in part one, what he's actually done with this war is he's created a solidarity of the people who are the nations on his borders. But where we got to that was most important, and where we're going to jump back into, is that this war is not being won at a military or traditionally army against army military level. It's being won by civilians who have taken up arms, by urban warfare. And we talked about in part one that John has been over there. He's had boots on the ground. He's met with more civilians than even the military people. And I want to talk about that part of it now, because there's a fourth turning here, and that is that the Russians invaded the Ukraine this time in 2022. They got pushed back hard, as you said, by grandfathers and 16-year-olds who said, no, I'm a Ukrainian. This is our country, bugger off. And that's marvelous. Russia began to retreat, get its ass kicked, abandoned its soldiers, abandoned its tanks, and then it seemed to take a turn. And the turn is that now they're firing missiles into the major cities. Now it seems like Russia is like, okay, you've pissed us off now. Talk to us about that, because that's a very real thing that is making people go, maybe the Ukraine can't win. It looked like they could, but maybe they can't now, because, dealing with that is pretty major.
Yeah. So thanks, Todd. There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is.
So absolutely, let's state facts. So, I have my own opinions about the world, but I'm also a military analyst, and that's why you see me on like CNN and Fox and things.
Yeah.
There are facts to objective observations of what's happening. And there are some crazies that say, okay, Russia's been winning, Ukraine's been losing. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of this year. In April of this year, it was defeated. It withdrew. It was defeated at the Battle of Kyiv, the Battle of Cherniv, Sumy. It was defeated so badly that it had to withdraw and tuck tail back into Belarus and back into Russia. And then have,
you know how many soldiers that was? How many people that they retreated?
Yeah, so they invaded with over about 120,000. So they retreated hundreds or tens of thousands. They also lost a lot, like literally entire units, their best units erased in places like Hostomel, in the airports and things like that. So these are just facts. These aren't opinions. And they withdrew. Like, how do you not see as these people that think that Russia's been defeating Ukraine and we've been helping them, like they themselves with Western weapons in the beginning defeated Russia in the streets, in the alleys, and in their homes. So much so that Russia had to pull back, like the second most powerful military in the world had to pull back against this very small military, but that mobilized their people and the people fought. That was April. And that's just an objective fact. One of the biggest victories in the modern era is how Ukraine defeated Russia from taking Kyiv and all their major cities. Russia then pulled back and over a few weeks said, oh no, I wasn't trying to take Ukraine. This has always just been about the eastern part of Ukraine, even though I invaded every major city in Ukraine. This has always been about the eastern part. And that's where we're reorganizing to make sure we can take the Donbass, the farthest eastern portion of Ukraine. Yeah. And as the months have gone on, again, I told you in the first part, we talked about Ukraine had to fight for its freedom. Yes. As an objective, like, geopolitical, once Ukraine fought for its freedom, yes, we saw more and more nations, even non-NATO members saying the genocide that Bucha was discovered and what the Russian soldiers are actually doing in Ukraine. It's not about liberating their own people. They're massacring people. Like, concentration camps, they call them filtration camps. These are all, again, facts. Like, you can't hide dead bodies of civilians with their arms tied behind their back and shot in the head at a massive scale. Like, literally, it goes against Putin's narrative of what he's doing in Ukraine. So it focused on, it took their 100,000 soldiers who were mauled, reorganized them against a much smaller area in Ukraine and started a new war for Donbass. And that was around April, May. Now what we've seen is Russia actually losing ground. So it retreated, it never got the big city. It retreated, focused on Donbass, and actually it was able to take portions of the Donbass, but then hit a wall and they couldn't move any further. So now we've seen, like a month ago, Ukraine went on the offensive, which is huge as a historian of war. Sure. Not to defend yourselves is one thing. To defend your street, your home, your cities, defenses are very strong. And that's why the manual I actually wrote for the Ukrainians is called the mini manual for the urban defender, because defending urban terrain is a lot different than attacking. But now Ukraine's military is on the defense or on the attack. Right. And Russia was being defeated, like overwhelmingly defeated. And then Russia starts running out of supplies. It's a fact. A nation's ability to fight a war, whether you're talking World War I, World War II now, is made up of two things. Its means, like how many bullets and tanks and everything it has, and its will to fight. Soldiers, its political leaders, its people. Russia was losing. It was losing men. It was losing tanks because they were abandoning them. Of all the people who supplied Ukrainians with weapons, Dov, the number one nation is Russia, because their soldiers abandoned their equipment. Right. It wasn't like they took by force. There was literally their soldiers ran away and left a running $1 million tank.
I'll leave the keys in the ignition for you, lads. I'm out.
So last 2 weeks ago, after Ukrainians struck a bridge in Crimea,
Yeah.
but of course Russia had already put these things into plans. It started going to North Korea and to Iran for supplies because they are out of their supplies.
Uh,
And Russia launched a massive missile and drone strike on all cities of Ukraine. And that
yes.
was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
That wasn't warfare. That was straight terrorism because they weren't shooting at military targets.
No.
They're shooting at playgrounds, power stations, fuel stations, all civilian targets. Almost every one of them war crimes because there's no military purpose for where they launched this at. So it's really, to me, a big sign as a military analyst, and you as maybe as a Putin analyst, a very big sign of weakness that their military can't win in the field of battle. So they're going to start attacking Ukrainian cities, hoping that the Ukrainian civilians lose the will to fight. It's actually called strategic bombing theory, and people have tried it in wars. It never works, right?
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say that from what I've seen of it, it seems very much to be a morale thing they're doing right now. They're trying to give the Russian people morale, saying we're bombing Kyiv, we're just shooting missiles in, and we're taking things out. And of course, they're bullshitting about where they're hitting. Of course, that's standard procedure. But the other side of it is that they're trying to demoralize the Ukraine. It seems like they're trying to demoralize the urban soldiers who are saying, but it seems to be empowering them, not the Ukrainians.
that's historical. Like, you think about the Blitz of London.
Yeah, London, yeah.
All you do is unite people
Yes.
who are already united. So all you're doing is galvanizing them, because it is about your identity. And there's that bombing campaign. One, the Ukrainians also shot down 80% of what was fired at them.
Is that right?
Yes, 80%.
Wow.
So soon, and so this is about geopolitics. You know that, I know that. So when Russia did that, launched this massive terrorism attack on all Ukrainian cities, if there was any country of the world, even in the United States, where there were people like, hey, we shouldn't be involved. No, we shouldn't give them that weapon. He not only galvanized the Ukrainian people, he just took all those fence sitters and put them in the camp of, yes, we need to give Ukraine the things they need to defend their people. Not even if you don't think, which we should, help them win on the battlefield in their country. They shot down 80% because Iranian, Islamic regime, drones are really crappy. And I can actually shoot at them from my house and shoot them down, which is another update I'll do to my manual. You can actually just point your weapon out the window and hit some of these slow-flying, slow-moving drones that they've gotten from Iran, which is about galvanize. They just galvanized 50-plus nations to give more.
Right. So again, I don't know what you know around the other side, but I'm interested because a lot of this, as we talked about, is it's a media experience, right? The fact that Vladimir Zelensky stayed in his country shows up never in a suit and tie anymore. Any political event he goes to, he's in his, not fatigues, but, close enough. He's stayed on the ground. He's stayed with his people. The fact that, the people seem to be very, like we're gonna be here. We're not going anywhere. And then there's also the other side in that I actually know Ukrainian families here in North America, and now they're talking about constriction in the Ukraine, just like they've got constriction happening in Russia. There are people who don't want to fight, of course, who want to get the hell out. And I know that many of them have fled to places like Poland. Do you think it will change anything if there's a constriction?
So
in Ukraine?
Absolutely not. And I actually talked to, so my driver in Ukraine was a young, like 21-year-old Ukrainian, actually had not voted for the president, said he didn't, but of course his overwhelming, you rise to the occasion, right? Leaders rise to the occasion or they don't. He rose to the occasion. So they did instill martial law, so no 18 to 60-year-old male could leave the country. They did put out guidance, you will resist. But again, your war goes to your will to fight.
Of course.
You can look at the difference. So conscription is a thing, right? It exists. Russia had an army that had a very large segment of conscription. Yeah. Ukraine has mandatory service as well. Up to this point, which is a telling of a nation, they haven't had to conscript men yet. So they've had enough volunteers to fight.
Yes.
They haven't done. So that's why I asked him, like, are you worried about being forced to join? He's like, well, so far it's gone by volunteers or people who have served previously, and he had no military experience. And if I'm called, I will fight for my country. That's the total opposite of what we just saw, where Russia conscripted,
fleeing the country.
Yeah, so they conscripted 200,000, but they had 400, 500,000 men running from the country.
Yeah,
because Russia nobody is threatening Mother Russia. Nobody is threatening Russia's way of life. This and that, just those two acts. Like, it's a great question about conscription. Ukrainian has mandatory service. It has millions of people, to include civilians, who are saying, I will resist. I will. And then those are actually the civilians I met too, where people who started off as civilians and then joined the military and then joined the special forces. They were what I call leveling up, as they understood that not only did their country succeed, and that success breeds success, right? A lot of these principles of warfare it's just human nature, leadership, right?
Of course.
It doesn't matter. It does matter about the weapons you have, but the most important thing is that your people are inspired to do what needs to be done. And this is where these elements of leadership in business and war meld together, because it is about leading humans.
Of course it is.
And this is Absolutely. Why I personally think there's no way in my own analysis that Ukraine can lose.
Okay, so that's where I wanted to go next, which is, why do you think they will win? Now, I've got this massive force called Russia, which has kind of tipped its hand, because it was interesting, because Russia was kind of an ethos. You know what I mean? It was more than it was kind of an idea that, these are guys who will fight, who, every movie we've seen, you hit them with a plank and they laugh at you, and then they rip your hair off and take a poop down your neck. They're just like these insane creatures. It's an ethos more than a reality. And that on top of that, you've got this, the massive military power of Russia. There's this big ethos. And then we're seeing this thing of young boys who are being, like at the beginning of the war, I saw these young boys phoning their mom and saying, I thought I was just on a military it was like some kind of exercise, and I've got no food and I got nothing. And, and I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't know I was going to war, and I'm fighting Ukrainians who are my brothers. That was a fantastic piece of media, by the way, from the Ukraine. Brilliant, superb. That was a war strategy that was done beautifully. But it was really clear that most of those Russians initially didn't want to be there. But now it seems different. It seems like the ones who are there, because you talked about it, there's now atrocities happening. And let me be clear in saying this from a psychological point of view. War is permission for evil people to do evil things. It doesn't mean that everybody who goes to war is evil, right? And I'm anti-war, so I'll tell you, I'm a peacenik, right? But it doesn't mean everybody who goes to war is evil. At the same time, the atrocities you talked about, people being shot in the head, concentration camps, babies being murdered. I mean, just it blows my mind. It's insane. So it seems like, John, the first wave was the people who were in the military, like they might be in the military in the US. We're poor, we want a job. This is a good way to get a bit of a career chance, get an education. We'll join the military. And yes, we get to tell ourselves we're being patriotic. Great. Okay. And then their idealism is sort of washed away and destroyed by what happened. And then comes this second layer of just butchers doing atrocities. And they seem to be that ethos. They seem to be the guys who are willing to do horrible, disgusting things. So that brings me to, can the Ukrainians win against that level of malevolence, that level of quote unquote evil? That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I absolutely. And there's a lot there.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm throwing you 18 questions in one.
That's right. That's okay. No, it's just so many things that I'm passionate about. Like identity, right? So I spent 25 years in the U.S. military, consider myself a warrior. And we also thought something about Russian soldiers, and that's who we trained for.
Yeah.
And there is ideologies and beliefs about another warrior class. But by my own definition of what a warrior is somebody, a fighter with a set of values that go along with that. And then those values of my warrior code is that a protector, right? So I will implement extreme violence on another individual to protect either my country, my family, or my brothers and sisters to my left and right. Once a soldier starts to do things that are outside of that source code, that warrior code, they're no longer a warrior, they're a savage.
Yes.
And that happens in militaries. And it's happened in the US military. But
of course,
the military is an arm of the society. And the society actually gives a warrior its power. Mm-hmm. So when you don't, then your justice is not served. So once the atrocities of like places like Bucha happened and the Russian military didn't do anything, they actually awarded medals to the butchers of Bucha.
Really?
Yeah, Putin himself awarded the unit that created or conducted genocide in Ukraine awards. And there's not been a single. So that's one, what the Ukrainians know they're facing is not warriors, they're butchers. Mm-hmm. And they actually have a thing now, they call them orcs, like the Tolkien's orcs.
Yeah, Tolkien's orcs,
because they're not a warrior class. No. There's systemic issues in the Russian military about how they treat an individual who joins the military. It's not built on trust, which I think you'll appreciate. Like the U.S. military is built on trust. Mm-hmm. I don't follow people because they tell me to do something. I follow them because they inspire me. I trust they have my own, I trust they're going to lead in good ways. Can the Ukrainians beat what is a horde of orcs in their countries who are prepared to do savage things? And what we're finding now in every place that Ukrainians liberate is just the evil things that Russians do every time they stop. It's almost like they've been ordered, it's condoned, or it's just accepted that they will commit war crimes, rape, genocide, all that. It's just what they do. That's not a military. So the Ukrainians have that as one of their motivators, is that that's who they're facing. What they're facing is this. But that's not the strongest form of warfare, right? The strongest form of warfare is a protector who is fighting for a reason, right? They're mean. That's why I love your show, because there's so much in there that is human nature. Right. Russia has forgotten what wins wars, right? So if Putin is a student of warfare, whether you're Napoleon, Caesar, like these things that win wars, the fact that it is the will of the soldier who is aligned to an identity of what it means to be a Spartan, an Athenian. there's no inspiring speeches by Putin about being a warrior class, liberating, because he knows that those narratives are false. The Russians are in Ukraine to do evil things.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be a much weaker system. That's why Ukraine can win. One, they're backed by 50 plus nations. They know that in themselves. And that's why the ability to put a video up, be like when somebody votes to provide a weapon system, that translates to their willingness to move forward and fight. Absolutely. I don't see a way they can lose, because Ukraine is fighting for all these reasons that drive individuals, that leads to group work, which leads to military performance. That's why I wrote the book Connected Soldiers.
Yeah.
Putin seems to have forgotten that and is sending now 200 plus thousand men who don't want to be there into fight and not training them. So as a leader, that's why I wrote that book. You have to give individuals an ideal of control, an ideal of, if they do these things, they'll lead to their success, to winning a basketball game, to achieving a market, a goal. You have to give them the ideal of control. If you take a guy off the street and send them into literally 3 days later, they're on the front line, they're not going to fight for you. It's just a fact.
So let's go to that, because that's the crossover point that I want to talk to about. Like, I mentioned it in the intro to this second part. Do you see leadership as a kind of urban warfare?
Absolutely. I mean, warfare is fighting. Whether you're fighting for your business, or in this case, you're fighting with weapons to save life and death. It doesn't work unless you don't have leadership. You don't have a team, right? I write in that mini manual is I give them instructions, but then I talk about form a team. Like, yes, that's where there's lots of things where Red Dawn gets it wrong, but you have to form a group, and that's where cohesion comes in. A group understands they only work if they work together.
Yes,
that's why war exposes the rawness of being humans. We are social. We have to work in communities. We have to have an identity. We have to have leaders that inspire us to continue to fight when it just seems like the challenges are many.
Mm-hmm.
That's leadership to me. And that's why I was put to the test as a leader. It's easy to lead when things are going well. It's really hard to lead when things are going bad.
Right. What do you think that, like, a business leader, what I mean by that is, somebody who is maybe a CEO or a C-suite individual inside of an organization, what could they look at and, sort of, of course, a 20,000-foot view, but looking at the war in the Ukraine and say, this is filled with lessons. Like, for me, it's the way I think. I'm always thinking about the psychology of leadership. So I watch, I watch Game of Thrones, and I'm like, what is the leadership lessons in here? I'm watching Superman. What is the psychology behind this? What's driving? Like, that's my mind. If somebody's in a leadership position, I think that they should be looking at the war in the Ukraine more than with an opinion. Of course, you can have an opinion. Everybody's going to have one. But at the same time, like, what's the lessons in leadership that we should be taking from watching this?
Oh man, there's so many.
Sure.
It's funny you mentioned Game of Thrones. I've been a part of two books, one on Game of Thrones, one on Star Wars. I wrote chapters and showing how those iconic things either say something about warfare or say something about human nature. And that's why, but really interesting about Game of Thrones is that why do these things become so popular is because we all can watch them and then talk to each other about them. It actually builds a community.
Yes, always.
So in Ukraine, like Game of Thrones, you see that there is good and evil in the world. In Ukraine specifically, what is winning and what is losing. So having an overall leader like Zelensky who can turn a message into inspiration, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is why I have a passion for storytelling as well. The story of our nation, it becomes my identity, right? I'm an American. So Zelensky, in a time when his nation was under stress, didn't put out long speeches, but he's a great communicator. And the power to say, like when they told him to leave the country, I don't need a ride, I need ammunition.
Yeah, that was a great message, man.
But that message as a leader is more important than anything you're going to do for, if you could get that right, to create a message which inspires and creates identity, like that's somebody people want to follow. He's a comedian who entered politics, but will go down as one of the world great war leaders because he understands that people need those messages. Even in this 24, 7 hours a day, social media, everybody is searching for meaning.
Absolutely.
And that's what he did. So in the war in Ukraine, you saw it happening in real time, where millions of people can be inspired by a single message or a single act, right? And this is, why we all love Spartans we tell stories which inspire us or our children or whatever. That's what I'm getting from Ukraine, is the ability to inspire people, but also that you have to be a communicator, right? You can't put out one message and that's it. Like you said, what he wears matters.
Yes.
And ironically, if he would be in uniform, as in a military uniform, that would actually send a different message.
Absolutely.
He's
sending a message that I'm willing to be on the sort of front line of what's going on while still being in the political position.
That's
right. Because so I'm not wearing a military uniform. So I'm not a dictator and I'm not on the battlefield, but I'm ready for whatever the hell's being thrown at me, but I'm not putting a tie on for you clowns because I've got a more important deal. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant.
And he is the great communicator. So this is about leadership. Like yes, the messages count, but when he communicates to the US Congress, his message is informed by his audience. Yes. So he creates a very inspiring message to relating to our identity, to our history. And that's why, as an individual, when I went to Ukraine, this feels a lot like Lexington and Concord. It just really feels like what I fought for 25 years to protect people, for freedoms and all of these things. That's leadership, is inspiring other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that, something you said earlier, and I think it's really important to come back to, is this whole thing around winning and losing. We live in a very absolute world. We live in a very black and white world, and we look at things as winning and losing. And what I always tell people is you can look at the scoreboard and you can win by 20 points and still feel like losers. And you can lose by 20 points and still feel like winners. What's the difference? And the answer is meaning.
Yeah.
And the person who controls the meaning controls the movement. You want to control the movement of a people, you control the meaning of the people. The narrative that the Russian people are receiving, particularly if they're younger, they don't believe. They don't attach to the meaning of it, so they're out. They're doing their best to remove themselves. Certainly older Russians, they'll buy that meaning because they grew up with that old meaning. Sure, okay. But the younger Russians are not interested in that. And the Ukrainian people seem to have really bought the meaning that Zelensky has been masterful at bringing to them and continues to bring to them, even when there are missiles raining down, the way that Churchill did with London in the Blitz. And I think that that's exactly the key, is the meaning. And if leaders today can't grasp that that's how you win the battle, that actually wins a series of battles, that wins the war, whether your battle space is on social media, whether it's on the war field, or whether it's in the urban market, or the global market, that's the message.
100%. And I mean, I don't like relating war to other areas, but it is human. What you're trying to keep people in your company.
Yeah.
You look at the different strategies of Putin or Russia versus Ukraine, because it was it isn't just Zelensky, but it is the Ukrainian message, which they have an army of people working on that message. And people care about symbols, right? Like I wear this shirt because I identify, it means a lot to me.
Sure.
But even creating a photo, which means a lot to an entire population of people, whether it's a flag or the iconic guy giving the bird to the Russian warship, that is powerful. That is meaning that leaders can't give to their people once. It's the business they're in, right?
But thank you, John, because that's so important. The meaning is not something you say once and then, okay, it's landed. You have to, I mean, so I'll give you an example so people understand this from a psychology point of view. If you can give meaning in 3 to 6 words, that's the best possible. 3 is better. Think about this. Take yourself back to 2015 and you heard a mantra, lock her up. 3 words. It echoed. It echoed whether you were going to vote Republican or Democrat. It echoed. It stuck because that was entrenched over and over and over again. And the media kept replaying it. So it works. And, that message of, I don't need a ride, I need weapons. Very simple. It's stuck in our heads. I have a dream.
Yep.
Any of those things, it's constant, right? I have a dream. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream 11 times in that speech. It was more than 20 times that he said, let freedom reign. Freedom is the message for Americans, right? It's that simple getting the meaning over and over and over again. And so many companies don't understand that. They go, yeah, I've done our purpose work. No, you haven't.
That's right.
And they go, yeah, we have. We did Simon Sinek's work. No, you haven't done it. Why? Because I can't go out there and say, tell me the meaning of this company in 3 to 6 words. Well, it's but let me talk to a Ukrainian. They'll have it.
Yeah.
And that's what's getting them out of bed in the morning or getting them off the floor in the morning to go fight in a battle where they're massively outpowered. And then suddenly there's this chutzpah that's there that's beyond anything anybody can imagine. As we are at the end of the show, and I know you and I can go for a lot longer. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. What was the single, if I ask you, what was the single message of your book that you wanted urban warriors to get? What was that message? And how does it relate to us sitting in the rest of the world going, yeah, I don't know.
Absolutely. So the single message of that book, and actually all my books, is that you're only powerful if you work together. So that's in the mini manual for the urban defender, which Ukraine used and printed 100,000 copies. I gave no profit. They could be more powerful than a military if they work together, right? It's revolution theory. It's all this. It's all theory, but it's a fact of human nature is that we are tribes. I know you tribal versus I got it. But one individual can be strong, but if it's many individuals, you can be great. And that's the message of that book. I give a couple of steps on do this, not this. Like don't be, in war, there's a science to war, but the art of war is actually human nature. And if you work together and you're motivated by your leadership, you can achieve everything. So that's why, leaders are team builders. That's the message of my book. I give a little bit of the science, but it is the art of leadership that wins wars.
Yeah. So this is the art of war, urban warfare, right? So thank you, Sansu of America. John, it's been a pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it. I know that you and I will have many other conversations. But before we finish, please tell everybody where they can find out more about you, about the books, how they can reach out to you, if they want to have you speak or in any other way.
Thanks, Dov. It's been an honor to be with you. Such a huge fan. So
Thanks,
people
mate.
can find me on johnspenceronline.com. All the books, every article I've ever written, how to reach me. You follow me on all the social media, but I am a part of this great business, and I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and honor, and I hope you'll stay with us to the end. For everyone else, I want you to know that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any past episodes inside of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. But, we really appreciate it if you go on to wherever you listen to podcasts, leave a rate, a subscribe, and review, and tell us what you got out of this show. Tell us what you learned from John that you can really think about how to apply into business, into your leadership. That makes a massive difference to us, and it allows people to understand the depth that we like to go to. Because as I said in the show, those who control the meaning for the tribe control the movement of the tribe. And you can tap into this groundbreaking understanding of how to apply the anatomy of meaning extracted from the emotional source code of yourself and as an individual, of your organization, or even nations. You can simply reach out to me at dovbaron.com. Again, we'll make sure that you have all the links to everything. I am Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between greatness and mediocrity in individuals and in companies. Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about whether you are a warrior for meaning or whether you're just spouting out something hoping to inspire. Meaning is what moves people. Meaning is what is moving the Ukrainian people. Meaning is what is allowing urban soldiers to defeat what was believed to be the second greatest army in the world. Stay curious, my friends. Stay curious. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you, tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.